1, 2, 3. Keep going. You're almost there. Rita squeezed her husband's hand, almost crushing it with her strength. She pushed as hard as she could, putting the pressure to her pelvis. You could do it, honey, Lynn said, encouraging her while trying to ignore the pain in his hand. 8, 9, 10, and stop. She laid back, her sweaty hair resting on the pillow. She felt her hands caressing her face. You're doing so good. She's almost there, he said. I can't do it, she said, out of breath. I'm too tired. Lynn kneeled down so he was looking at his wife directly in the face. Yes, you can. I believe you, he began. Remember this. 5 more minutes of pain and then a lifetime of happiness. Okay, Rita, I need you to push one more time for me, okay? She nodded and then pushed down as hard as she could. The screams of his wife didn't bother him, though. He was too fascinated on watching his daughter come into the world. Okay, Dad, do you want to take a look? He stepped over at the table and saw what brought him to tears. The baby was almost out, and was just dangling near the doctor's hands. Of course, it was not shown to anyone. Keep going, here she comes. With one last push, he watched as the doctor pulled out his daughter, her small, squished up face looking at him. The doctor then laid the baby on top of Rita's chest as she began to cry. I can't believe it! Here she is, she sobbed. She then rubbed the baby's soft blonde hair. A nurse came over to suction out her eyes and mouth. She let out a cry as it was music to the new parents' ears. He kneeled down beside his wife, caressing the baby's face. She's so beautiful, he said, wiping a tear from his eye. Rita then grabbed one of her feet. Oh, look at her. She's all little web feet. His eyes widened. My cousin had those too, he said, and she has my cone head as well. It's okay, Rita said, hugging her husband and hugging her chest. She's perfect. The doctor handed him a pair of scissors and allowed Lynn to cut the cord. Once she was all cleaned up and swaddled, she was given back to the parents. Rita held the tiny newborn in her arms, inspecting every piece of her. Well, she has your nose, she said, placing a finger on top of the baby's nose. Well, she has your eyes, he said. The baby responded by opening her eyes. He then waved a hand right in front of her face. Hey, baby, I'm your daddy. She responded by letting out a soft gurgle, which made them burst into tears again. The new mom wiped her eyes. I know what we should name her, she said, looking at her husband. He rubbed the back of her hair. I'll go with whatever you pick. She looked back at the baby and then said in a trembling voice and a smile, Lori. Lynn placed a kiss on top of her lips. Lori loud. He kissed the baby's cheek. I love the sound of that. Breathe, honey, breathe. Lori took a few deep breaths as the contraction began to pass. She laid her head back on the pillow, feeling her hands with her mother stroking her face. Oh, that one really hurt, she said, closing her eyes. They will hurt, and once the baby's about to come, they'll get worse, said a voice. A nurse walked up with the machines next to the bed. Oh, sorry, I didn't introduce myself. I'm Natalie, and I'll be your nurse for the entire time. She inspected the machines and then pointed at one. You see this one? It shows both your heartbeat and the baby's. There are 2 sets of green lines, one with large numbers. The lines going up and down. We use this to check for signs of stress in the baby and you too. So far, it looks fine. The 2 older women walked in. Sorry we're late. The traffic was awful. That's all right, Natalie said. These are my nursing students, Jackie and Valerie. They'll be assisting me today. They waved at Lori. She smiled and waved back. Natalie then turned to look at her. Well, everything looks good here. I'll be back on to check up on you soon, okay? She pointed at the button on the bed. You can also use this if you need anything, and one of us will come. They all left the room, and she turned to her mother. Where's Bobby? I'm starving. Rita then sat down on the chair next to her bed. I'm sure he'll be back soon. She rubbed Lori's hair. And you're doing so good, you know that? Thanks, Mom. I really needed it, she said, rubbing her belly. I just want this baby out. Her mom laughed. They'll be here soon, and then you can finally relax. Lori closed her eyes. I hope so. They heard the door open, and Bobby walked in with 2 brown bags. Hey, babe, sorry it took so long, he said, handing the bag to Lori. The line of the burping burger was so long, and they were having a discount today or something. Anyways, I got your favorite, a burping double with curly fries. Her mouth watered as she grabbed the food from him. Oh, thank you so much, Boo Boo Bear, she said, sticking a handful of fries in her mouth. He sat down next to her and grabbed his own fries. Oh, and your family's here, he said. They're just in the waiting room. Oh, that's great, Lori said. What about yours? Lincoln called Ronnie Ann, and they said they'll be here soon, he said. Oh, good. She then set her foot down and grabbed Bobby's hand. Oh, here's another one. Listening to her groan, it made his heart hurt. There was a clinch of guilt knowing that he did this to her. Breathe, Lori. It's okay, her mom said. Bobby rubbed his hair. You could do it. She then let out a few deep breaths. There you go. Once she calmed down, she went back to her food, and she felt Bobby squeeze her hand and looked up at him. His face made her heart sink. He had a few tears in his eyes, and his head was slightly down. She then reached over to touch his face. Boo-Boo Bear, what's the matter? He sniffled. I'm sorry, babe. He then turned to her. Seeing you in pain, it hurts me knowing that because of me. It makes me upset. Lori frowned and placed a hand to her chest. Oh, Bobby, come here, she said, reached out her arms. He stood up and wrapped his arms around her, feeling the warmth as she did the same. It's okay, it's not your fault, she said, rubbing his back. She listened to his little cries as she tried to comfort him. I'm sorry, he said, his voice shaking. Lori pulled away to look at his face. It's okay. The important thing is that you're here and you're helping me and supporting me. He wiped his nose. You're right, I'm here, he said. I just hate seeing you like this. It'll be over soon. Through that door, the doctor said it might take a while. He gave her a kiss. I'll be there for the whole way. The labor and delivery ward of Royal Woods General was quiet, a little too quiet for the Louds' liking. They only had been there for about a half an hour, and already the kids were bored out of their minds. Daddy, Lola said, putting her dad's pants. I'm bored. He then looked up from the magazine and he was browsing. You've been here before, honey. You know they keep the toys, he said, pointing to the small room at the corner. Ugh, the 6-year-old shouted and slouched his shoulders. Those toys are boring, she said, crossing her arms. Lynn Sr. sighed and looked at his daughter's grouchiness. Well, I don't know what else to tell you, sweetie. We're going to be here for a while. She then climbed onto the seat next to him and grumbled to herself. Don't look so down, sis, Luna said, shooting her a grin. There's a lot of cool stuff here to do. She picked up the kids' magazine. I used to love these when I was a kid. Why don't you give a look? Lola rolled her eyes and grabbed the magazine from her sister. She flipped it through, and it was filled with activity pages such as quizzes and word search puzzles. She then huffed, boring. She then continued to look for the pages until she saw something that caught her eye. They have a section for pageant dresses, she said, her eyes brightening. Seeing that her sister was happy, Luna shot her the thumbs up. She reached into the bag and pulled out her headphones, turning on her favorite playlist. She decided to lay her head back and relax. Gee, I think you brought some enough comments, Link, Lynn said, as she looked through the stacks of books sitting on the table. Lincoln then looked up and the one he was reading. Well, I don't know how long we'll be here, so I thought I'd bring all of them, just in case. She then gave him a punch in the arm. Ha, nerd. She then leaned back on the chair. Hey, Lynn, can you help me here with something? Lenny said, walking over to her. Sure, what is it? Lenny was frantic. I tried to buy a snack and the machine took my money, but it won't give me my snack. Her sister rolled up her sleeves. Oh, this is one of those wise guys, eh? Well, you've came to the right person. She got up and led Lenny towards the machine. See, I tried to get those chips, but it won't give it to me, Lenny said, pointing at the bag of chips. I got this, sis. Don't worry. She walked up to the machine and gave it a good kick. Then another one, but it wouldn't budge. Oh, so you want to play that game with me, huh? She then began to shake the machine. Careful, Lynn. It might fall. Lenny put her hands on her sister's back. Step back, Lenny. I got this. After a few minutes, she set the machine down with a dank, and she looked over at the bag of chips that fell down into the slot. Wiping the sweat from her forehead, she spoke. There we go. She then kneeled down and reached the slot, grabbing the bag of chips. Lenny squealed and grabbed the chips. Well, thank you so much, Lynn. I was starving. The athlete popped back up. No problem, though I think I do need to sit down for a bit. They walked over to the waiting area to see their father sleeping. It was a lot quieter than it had been. They looked around. Uh-oh, most of their siblings have gone. It seemed only Luna, Lincoln, and Lola remained in their seats. Linky? Lincoln looked up to see his sister standing before him. Yeah? Where did our sisters go? Lenny asked. He looked around. Nowhere in sight. I don't know. What? Well, why don't you are just sitting here for? We gotta find them, Lynn said. He sighed and put his comic down. Okay, just let me put these in a safe place. He took out his bag and put the entire pile inside, and then stood up. Let's go find our sisters. Rita's ears were ringing as her daughter screamed once more. You could do it, Lori. Come on, it's almost over, Natalie said, holding her hand. How you doing, Dad? Bobby squinted his eyes. I'm okay. She's hurting my hand. The contraction passed and Jackie wiped the sweat off of Lori's head with a wet cloth. Thank you so much, she said. She looked over at her boyfriend, who was looking at his swollen hand. Oh, Boo-Boo Bear, I'm sorry, she said. Here, let me see. She grabbed his hand and gave it a kiss. There, that should make it better. He smiled. It did, thanks, although you should squeeze this pillow instead. He handed the pillow to her. Knock, knock, Dr. Roth said as she walked into the room. How are we doing, Lori? I'm okay, I guess, she said out of breath. That's perfectly fine. Let's take a look, shall we? She sat down on the stool near the end of the bed and stuck her hand into Lori's birth canal. She grabbed Bobby's hand and made her fidget. He responded by rubbing it with his thumb. Wow, you're about 6 centimeters already, she said. It won't be much longer now. Really? Bobby said, excited. The doctor nodded. Yep, if everything goes well, we should have a baby within the next couple hours. Lori and Bobby both grinned. Oh, that's great, he said. Oh, and I meant to ask, Dr. Rolf said, standing up. Do you want the epidural? You can get it now if you want, but it may be slow your labor. Lori looked up at Mom. What do you think? It's up to you, sweetie. I've done it with and without, she said. Which is harder? Her mom laughed. Neither one is easy, really. She looked up at Bobby. What do you think? He rubbed her hair. Well, I'm with your mom. It's up to you, he said. But no matter what you choose, I'll support you. She looked and took a moment to think, and then looked back at the doctor. Doctor, I think I will want to go try natural. Dr. Rolf nodded. All right, if that's what you want. I have to go check on my other patients. Let me know if you need anything. She had left the room, and Bobby looked at his girlfriend. You really want to do this, babe? He asked. She then looked down at her belly. Yeah, I'll do anything to get this baby out. Luann, Lucy, Lily, Lenny, Lynn, and Lincoln walked down the halls of the hospital, looking for their missing siblings. Where could they be? Lynn said, looking under a bench. Aha! Lincoln screamed as someone jumped in front of him. He made a closer look. Lana, is that you? Lana was sitting on top of him. The 6-year-old was wearing a hospital gown with complete gloves and masks. I'm not Lana. I'm a zombie, she said, wrapping his arms around him. Now let me eat your brains. He laughed as his sister tickled him. Okay, that's enough, he said, grabbing her and sitting her on his lap. We gotta find the rest of our sisters before they get into trouble. Well, oh, can I help? She said excitedly. Of course, he stood up and set her to the ground. Come on, let's go. They made their way through the hospital, searching every section that they were allowed access. It appears that your diagnosis is off. Lincoln stopped. Wait, do you guys hear that? His sister stopped to listen to the voice. But Dr. Loud, I've done every test and they all turned out positive. She then looked over the peak of the room. There stood Lisa, conversing with the doctor. And that's where you're wrong, she said, pointing at something on this paper. You failed to complete the blood count. It results your patient is having a false diagnosis. The doctor stared at his sheet, his eyes wide. Oh my goodness, you're right, he said. I apologize, Dr. Loud. I will schedule this test immediately. No worries. Now if you excuse me, I must be on my way. She jumped down from her stool and headed towards the door. She didn't get far as she bumped into Lincoln. Lisa, what are you doing? I was merely helping up with this doctor. I do have PhD, you know, she said, adjusting her glasses. Well, stop it. Our sisters are missing. If we don't find them soon, we might get kicked out. You know what that means? Her brother told her, putting his hands on her hips. Well, we get kicked out. Remind us that we won't be able to meet our niece or nephew, she said. She stared at her dumbfounded. Wow, you're good. She then shrugged. Considering our family is history, it's common sense. Lincoln grabbed her hand. I see your point. Now come on. They reached out for the search, hoping to find their sisters in time for the birth. They found Luann telling jokes to some patients, and Lucy was inspecting the room where they kept a few pints of blood. And Lily was somehow made her way into the nursery to steal a teddy bear. Making their way back to the maternity ward, Lincoln heard a familiar voice. How much longer will it be? My wife just came out and she said that she's about ready to push. Oh, really? That's great. Ronnie Ann, he said. He ran up to her and gave her a hug. You finally made it. She then hugged him back. Yeah, the traffic outside was horrible. Did you know the Burpin Burger was having a discount day? Lynn Sr. stood up. There you kids are. You had me worried sick. Data, Lily said from Linny's arms. Aw, come here, sweetie, he said, and he grabbed her. We're sorry, Dad, Lincoln said. You fell asleep while the others ran off. Linny, and I had to go find them. His dad looked relieved. Well, I'm just glad you guys did, and thanks, guys, he said. Your mother just came out and said the baby will be here soon. Lincoln watched as his sisters began to cheer, prompting a shh from their father. Easy, kids. Remember where you are. Oh, hey, Lincoln. He turned around to see CJ next to him, holding his plastic sword. Want to play pirates? He then smiled and politely declined. I'd love to, buddy, but how about we do something a bit more quiet? He then walked over to his bag and grabbed some comic books. Looks like reading comics. Ever heard of Ace Savvy? CJ looked confused, but happily obliged. I'll read some of those too, Ronnie Ann said, grabbing a book. How about we all read together? Sounds good to me, Lincoln said. Almost 7 hours had passed since Lori went into labor, and it was now the moment of birth. Dr. Roth walked in, wearing a medical coat and gloves. All right, Lori, let's check. She then sat down on her stool next to the end of the bed, sticking her hand to check Lori's cervix. Oh, yes, you're ready. I can feel the head. Lori lifted up her head. Really? The doctor nodded. Yep, let me go get the nurses and then we can get started. Bobby smiled. You hear that, babe? The baby's almost here. She groaned. Finally! I'm so tired, I'm ready to sleep. He caressed her face. I know. You'll be able to soon. Dr. Roth then walked in with Natalie and Jackie, and with Valerie, who'd been following close behind her. All right, there we go. She looked up at Rita. Does Grandma want to hold a leg? She stood up. I'd love to. She then walked over to the end of the bed, grabbing one of Lori's legs. There was another one being held by Jackie, while Valerie stood by Lori's bed and near her head, giving her sips of water. Bobby grabbed her hand. You could do this, Lori. I'll be here. Dr. Roth looked up at Lori. All right, I'll count to 10, and I want you to push as hard as you can, okay? She nodded. 1, 2, as the doctor counted, Lori pushed with all the pressure on her pelvis. Bobby squinted as he heard her scream. 9, 10. That was good, the doctor said. Okay, another one. 1, 2. A few minutes passed with Lori pushing and screaming as hard as she could. 9, 10, and stop. She fell back onto the pillow, sweat dripping from her down her face. Valerie offered her water, which she pushed away. Okay, Lori, I see the head, Dr. Roth said. I just need you to push one more time, okay? She closed her eyes and her head shaking. I can't. I'm too tired, she said, her breathing heavily. Bobby scooted over close to her. Hey, it's okay. You're so close, babe, he said, wiping the sweat off of her face. You can do it. No, I can't, she said, tears dripping down from her face. I just can't. Rita looked at Valerie. Hey, would you hold her leg for me? The girl nodded and they switched places. Rita kneeled down to her daughter and began stroking her hair. Lori, honey, you're doing so good. You know that? The baby's right there. You just need to push one more time. Lori shook her head. No, I can't, Mom. I can't. She frowned. All the years of spending having babies, she never thought there would be times where she'd seen her in pain like this. So tired and stressed out. If there was one thing she knew about babies, though, is that they were strong. Rita grabbed her daughter's hand. I know you're tired, it's tough, but listen to me, Lori. You're strong. You never let anything get you down. I remember when you were born, I felt this way too. I wanted to give up, I was so tired, but I had your father there with me, and we wanted to be there for the beautiful baby. When then you came out, all my pain and frustration had vanished. So listen to me when I say this. 5 more minutes of pain, and for a lifetime of happiness. Yeah, you can do it, babe. I know you can. With encouraging words from her mother and boyfriend, she knew she had to do. Letting out a scream that probably woke up half the town, she pushed as hard as she could. Good, keep going, the doctor said. Hey, Dad, you want to come have a look? Bobby let go of Lori's hand and moved over to the end of the bed. The baby's head was almost out, just dangling in the doctor's hands. He could feel his eyes begin to itch. Okay, I got it, Dr. Roth said as he pulled the baby's head out, then the shoulders. Finally, their baby had entered the world. She then smiled as the baby looked down at their nether regions. Does Dad want to tell Mom what it is? Bobby looked over and his mouth dropped open as he saw it. Babe! He then walked over to Lori, his tears dripping down his face. We have a son. The baby was laid on top of her with a blanket, while Natalie began suctioning the nose and mouth. Lori felt tears running down her face as she started to cry. Hi, baby boy, she said, holding him to her chest. At that moment, it was when all the life had stopped. Nothing else mattered anymore. All the pain she was currently experiencing didn't matter. The bags were under her eyes and the sweat underneath her armpits didn't matter. All that mattered was a small, little, fragile human being had just entered the world. Her son was all that mattered. She looked over at Bobby, whose tears had been streaming down his face. He's so beautiful, she said, his voice shaky. I love him so much. Lori looked back at the baby, and his light tan skin shined in as well in the room. His soft tuft of fur was on his head, blowing slightly with the breeze from the fans in the room. He was perfect. She looked over at her mom, who was struggling to hold back her tears. She leaned down and gave Lori a kiss on her head. I'm so proud of you, sweetie, she said, sniffling. He's so amazing. Lori looked back at him. He's literally amazing, she said, wiping her eyes. Thanks, Mom. Dr. Roth handed Bobby a pair of scissors and cut the cord. Natalie walked over with a blanket. You'll never blanket. Is it okay if I take him for a bit? She asked. Of course. Lori then watched as her son being carried away. I'll go watch him, babe, Bobby said, following the nurse. A minute or so later, he walked back over with the baby in his arms. Here he is, nice and clean, he said. He weighs about 6 pounds and 8 ounces. Lori laid him on her chest. He's a big boy, she said, booping his nose. Do you know what we're naming him? Rita asked. Lori and Bobby looked at each other. I think I have one, Lori said. He kissed her cheek. I'll go with whatever you pick, he said. He looked over at his son, who was snoozing away. Louis, after his daddy because it fits the 4-letter in the L theme. Bobby smiled. Really? Yes, she nodded. Louis Loud Santiago. He then rubbed his son's hair. Louis Santiago. I love it. Do you want Louis to be your name? She asked the baby playfully. He responded by letting out a grunt. I think that's a yes, Lori said with a laugh. Rita wiped her eyes and stood up. Well, I think I'm gonna go tell the news to everyone. Before she could reach the door, she heard Lori call out to her. Hey, Mom? She turned around the corner. What is it, honey? Can you tell Lincoln that I want him to see the baby first? Rita smiled and put a hand on her chest. Oh, of course. And that's when Ace defeated the evil kings of spades, Lincoln said, pointing at the comic book that Ronnie Ann was holding. She then raised a brow and looking at him. You really know your stuff, Lamo. He laughed. Yeah, I've been really a fan of him ever since I was 4. So you've always been a Lamo fan, Lamo then, Ronnie Ann said, nudging his arm. They laughed. Suddenly everyone looked at the hallway entrance as footsteps could be heard. Rita appeared, causing everyone to stand up. So guys, the baby's here, she said. As everyone began talking excitedly and asked questions, Rita motioned her arms. Settle down, everyone. And Lori and baby are just fine. She's pretty tired and doesn't want many visitors right now. The collective awe could be heard. But she did have a special request. She then looked over at Lincoln, sticking out her hand. Come on, sweetie. Lori has asked if you wanted to see the baby first. Lincoln looked up at his mom with his mouth dripping open a bit. Really? She nodded. Yep, let's go. He handed this comic to Ronnie Ann, who gave him a smile and stood up to grab Rita's hand. She then led him down the long hallway that he could already begin to feel a sweat form on his face. His legs became shaky and his breathing became heavily as he felt his heart racing in the chest. They stopped right in front of the plain white door. Here we are, she said. She pushed open the door and stepped inside. Lincoln saw his sister lying in the bed with a small bundle in her arms. She put a finger to her lips, indicating that they needed to be quiet. He stepped in close with his legs, couldn't take him without collapsing. Hi, Linky, she whispered. Are you ready to meet your new nephew? A shaky smile quickly spread across his face. A nephew? He had a nephew? Lori then held out the baby to him, but he stepped away. I can't, he started. But my hands are too shaky, and what if I drop him? She then smiled at her brother. It's okay, Lincoln. You won't drop him. He let the baby be in his arms. His breathing became slower as he looked up at his adorable, sleeping face. His name is Louis, Lori said softly. Hi, Louis. I'm your Uncle Lincoln, he said. It took him a few moments to realize that he had a nephew. His sister had a son. It was nearly another boy in the family. He gently rocked Louis in his arms and caressed her cheek. His lips began to tremble, a few tears running down his cheek. Lori frowned. Oh, Linky, why are you crying? He then nodded, sniffling. Yeah, he sniffled. I just love him so much. Rita held out her hands as Lincoln handed the baby. He walked up to his sister, placing his arms around her. Lori then hugged him back as hard as she could, and she laid her head on his. He let himself cry into his big sister's shoulder. She rubbed his back and whimpered loudly. I'm so sorry. I just, he sobbed. Shh, it's okay, Linky. I love you, she said, running her fingers through his hair. I love you too, he said, sniffling. For a little while, it was just him and his big sister. She laid there, caressing him as he let out all the happiness and feelings that he was experiencing. Lori expected him to react away, but with knowing her little brother already felt such strong attachment to her son, it's made her heart melt. Their moment was interrupted by a little cry. Uh-oh, Mommy, baby needs you, Rita said from the side. Lincoln gave his sister a last squeeze and stepped away. Oh, let me have him, Lori said, holding out her arms. She lifted up her gown, allowing Lois to latch on to her. He's such a good baby, and he already knows what to do, she said, rubbing his hair. Of course, she used the blanket to cover for herself and Louis. Lincoln then smiled and looked over at Bobby, who had been watching the entire time. He ran over to him and gave him a hug. Congrats, Bobby! You're now a dad, he said happily. Bobby then tousled Lincoln's hair. I know, and you're an uncle today, buddy. I can tell you're his favorite one, too. Yeah, and his only one. They laughed as Lincoln wiped the remaining tears from his face. I'm so sorry about that. Bobby waved his hands down. Aw, don't worry. I cried like a baby when I saw him come out. He then turned to see his sister. I could tell your sisters it's okay to come in, and Dad too, he asked. Yeah, go ahead, she said, although this little guy will be eating for a bit. Lincoln then walked over to her and gave Lewis a kiss on the forehead. I'll see you later, little buddy. He then headed over to the hallway, wiping any stray tears from his face, and he stepped into the waiting room. He reached out as everyone stared at him. Is everything okay, Linky? Lainey asked with a worried look on her face. He still, yeah, everything is perfect, he said. Then he walked over to where his sisters and Ronnie Ann were sitting. We have a nephew, he said. All the girls' faces lit up. Lori had a boy? Lana exclaimed. Lincoln nodded. She did, and he's so precious. Then he heard a sniffle. I have a grandson? Lynn asked, wiping the tears from his eyes. Luna patted him on the back. Lori wants you and the sisters to come in, Lincoln said. Oh, and you too, Ronnie Ann. She looked up at him. Really? He nodded. Yeah, after all, he grabbed her hand. You are part of the family too. She smiled. Thanks, Lincoln. Lola tapped her foot. Can you guys hurry up? I want to see the baby. Lincoln laughed. Okay. He motioned for them to follow him. Let's go. The girls followed them, and some of them even shook with excitement, while the others smiled happily. They stood right in front of the door. Lincoln then turned to them. Shh, we have to be quiet, okay? The girls nodded. They stepped inside, and Lori had just finished feeding the baby and was wiping his mouth. Hey, girls, she said, cradling him in her arms. The baby let out a confident aw. Baby, Lily said from Luna's arms. Yes, that's a baby, she said. Can you say nephew? Nephew, Lily said. Luna clapped her hands. Yay, you did it. She responded by clapping her own hands. Lana and Lola leaned up against the bed, trying to get a better look. Look at his feet, Lola said. And look at his nose, Lana said. What's his name? Ronnie Ann asked. His name is Louis, Bobby said. Lori nodded. Yeah, I choose that name after his dad. She gave Bobby a kiss on the cheek, and it's an L name. That's perfect, Lynn said. He stepped into the bed. He's so cute. Do you guys want to hold him? Lori asked. They all raised their hands. One at a time, they each got to hold their newborn nephew. Linny gushed out about how she would be his fashion designer. Luna sang them a lullaby. Luann told him jokes. Lynn talked about him, about how she'd make sure that he'd grow up to be strong. Lucy did say she'd write a poem about him. Lana told him that about mud pies. Lola mentioned to Lori about she would consider putting him in a baby pageant. Lisa even tried to keep herself from crying while whispering about having the youngest test subject, and they had to keep Lily from pulling on his ears and hair. Okay, Nini, it's your turn, Bobby said as he grabbed Louis away from Lily. Ronnie Ann could feel her hands shaking. Okay, she said, reaching out her hands. Her brother placed the infant in her arms, and she got a good look at him. His eyes were open, taking everything around him. Hi, I'm your Aunt Ronnie Ann, or Ta Ronnie Ann, whatever you like to call me, she said. You're so cute, and my brother will take such good care of you. The baby gurgled. Yeah, she said. You're in good hands. Aw, he loves you, Nini, Bobby said. She blinked as she felt her eyes begin to water. I love him too, she sniffled. Bobby kneeled down and gave his sister a hug. It's okay, Nini. Let it out. She then handed the baby to Luna and then hugged her brother back. I love you, Bobby, she said, her tears dripping down from her face. He sniffled. I love you too, Nini, he said. I'll be the best aunt ever. I promise. He squeezed her. I know you will be. After everyone had met Louis and it had gotten late, the Castorades decoded to get to the hotel so they could stay for a few days, and the Louds went home. Are you sure you don't want me to stay? Rita asked as she packed her purse. Lori looked at Bobby and went back to the sleeping baby in her arms. Yeah, I think we'll be okay until the morning. Alright, call me if you need anything. She kissed Lori's forehead. We will. Aw, let me see my grandson just one more time, Lynn said as she stepped into the room. She then even walked over to the bed and gave a kiss on Louis's forehead. Good night, sweet boy, he said with a baby voice. Don't keep your parents up all night. Lori laughed. Good night, Dad. He then kissed his daughter's cheek. Good night to you too, and congratulations again to you both. Thanks, Mr. Lynn, Bobby said. Rita and Lynn waved goodbye as they left the room, leaving the new parents to themselves. Bobby climbed into the bed next to Lori and putting her arm around her. I can't believe it. Our first night together as a family. Lori smiled. Yeah, it's kind of crazy, she said. One night we had been together turned into this bundle of little joy right here. He then rubbed the baby's neck. Yeah, and it's crazy, but it's a good kind. She then looked at her son. He looked so small and so fragile in his arms. You know what I just realized? She said, looking at Bobby. What is it? He asked. Despite the fact that I'm exhausted and my lady parts are so sore right now, she began. This honestly has been my best birthday ever. She took a deep breath and looked at the sleeping baby in her arms. And I never got to open any of my presents, but it's okay. Because I got the best gift I could ever ask for. Aw, he said. Happy birthday, babe. He gave a kiss on her lips. And happy birthday, Louis. Finally, it's so good to be home, Lori said as she stepped out of the car. Me too. The hospital food didn't really sit well with me, Bobby said, rubbing his stomach. She then stepped into the house and turned the doorknob. Hey, why is it dark in here? She flipped the switch. Surprise! All of her siblings jumped out from behind the furniture. Lori jumped back as she had a big smile on her face. The living room was decorated for a birthday party, complete with a banner that read, Happy Birthday, Lori, and another one that read, Welcome home, Louis. Bobby walked in and set the car seat to the ground. Wow, you guys really went out, huh? Lenny then walked up to Lori. We thought that since you didn't get to have your birthday party, she began, that we've set it back up again. We even got your cheesecake, Lola said, holding up the cake. Lori's mouth dropped open again. Wow, guys, I don't know what to say, she said. She grabbed the cake from Lola. Other than I'm starving, I want some of this cake. Her siblings laughed as the twins held over onto the couch. Bobby picked up the car seat. I'll be there in a few, he said, adjusting the stairs. I'm gonna go put this little guy down. He then walked over down the hall and opened the door to Lori and Lenny's room, setting the car seat down near to the bassinet, and he began to take his son out very carefully. Louis began to cry. Shh, it's okay, Bobby said, holding him to his chest. Daddy's here. He then laid the baby into the bassinet and watched as his eyes spots fluttered, and his breathing came slow and ready. The new father smiled, beginning to work and giving his son on the kiss. Good night, Mojo, he said as he headed out the lights. Louis may not have known this yet, but he was lucky that he'd been born to the parents who had a dying love for each other, and he could already expect many aunts and uncles and cousins who loved him. They were already excited about the new things, hoping that someone would have a shared bond with. His birth may have been unexpected, but that didn't stop his family from loving him. The circumstances of one's birth must not be an impact on just one such person. Little did he know that he had so much to learn growing up in a house that had one boy and 10 girls. Life works in mysterious ways, but it will always go fine, and then it always throws into a curveball away. I never imagined how I would ever have a baby at the age of 19. I had so many things planned for myself, like moving out, going to college. My last year of life has been nothing but joy. I met your father, and he's the best guy I've ever had in my life. He loves you so much. Even though my life wasn't the way I imagined it, I think it has changed for the better. I still want to accomplish my dreams so that I can make you proud. You are my son, and you deserve all the best things in my life. You were born in quite into an interesting family. Growing up with 10 siblings is something many people can't say. Your aunts and uncle were so happy and excited to meet you. They wanted to spend time with you and teach you all the great things in life. They'll never stop saying how much they love you. Your dad's side is pretty crazy too. You'll grow up into a multi-layer family. Not many kids get that experience. Your Aunt Ronnie Ann loves you so much, as well as your cousins. My pregnancy was kind of a long journey. From telling this to all my family too, and dealing with 10 bullies, the back pain, and even morning sickness, the sleepless nights, it was all worth it. You're the best thing that's ever happened to me. I didn't think every of my first moments of adulthood, early, would be filled with such making bottles, getting peed on, and never getting enough sleep. Watching you grow, playing with your aunts and uncle, it warms my heart. I know that you'll grow up to be something amazing. I'm so happy that your dad and I will be around to see it. You're my little miracle, Louis. Love you forever and always. Lori, aka Mom. And that, my little pretties, was Unexpected, a Loud House fanfiction. Written by WyomingParmasen, or whatever it's called. My final thoughts on the story. Okay, so since this story was really long, I'm going to do my best and keep this review as short as I possibly can. And especially with this chapter taken by the fact that it took me like a half an hour, a few minutes over a half an hour to sit there and narrate this. So I'm going to sit there and, go on with what I actually thought of this story. Overall, I found this one to be actually a really well-made story. I definitely have to say that the story itself was actually really good and well made. I actually do like how, the whole concept itself was actually really nice. I like the good grammar, the sentence structuring, the storyline, and I could visualize this as a good Loud House creepypasta. Well, it's not fanfic, not creepypasta, but fanfiction, so to speak. And take it by the fact that I've actually have seen this story while I was looking for some good Loud House stories, because most of them nowadays that I've seen were just let's just say that they were loud cest stories, and those ones are kind of disgusting. But I just decided to take a skim through this because this one seemed promising to be good with no loud cest, and thank God there's no loud cest in this story. I'm really grateful for that, because otherwise I wouldn't have been sitting there and narrating this story. So with that being said, I'm going to sit there and say that the author did a great job with this story. So when I saw this story, I just had to read it. It was a really well made story. Having it, expecting, Lori to go through pregnancy, and I'm glad, she has a supportive family who didn't, just sit there and kick her out, not like most parents would nowadays. Like, most parents nowadays, when it comes to their, you know, sibling being pregnant, they usually would kick their daughter or son out, but not in this case, though. Lynn Sr. and Rita were, like, more supportive, and their sisters were more supportive of it. And I do like the fact that I could actually picture this being the case. Like, I could actually picture, Loud House doing something like this maybe in the future if they make more, seasons. And they still are today, but I'm gonna sit here and say, if they decide to go down this route, like, take this story as an example and go down the route with Lori, being pregnant and all that, I could actually visualize that being the case if that was the actual case. So, I actually like the good grammar of this story along with the sentence structuring and the storyline, and I can actually say that I really like the concept itself to be really nice in this story. So I'm just going to say this is not really a long review, because mainly I'm trying to keep this review as short as I possibly can, because this story, oh my goodness, this story was long, but it was a pretty good story in that. So, with that being the case, I'm going to sit here and, go through, if I have to say one thing I wasn't really that, crazy on, I can't really find anything that I can't say that I wasn't crazy on. I can't really find what really bothered me. Now, I don't see anything negative with the story or anything, so yeah, that's a good point for there. But I could definitely say that this story had a lot of time and effort into the story, so I definitely have to say to the author, amazing and awesome job. So, in the regards to this story, I'm gonna go ahead and wrap up the review, and I just got a few things to say. Great job with this story, I definitely have to say. So with that being the case, I'm gonna sit here and, sit here and say this right now, that this is simply my own personal opinion, and if you happen to disagree with me, that's fine too. We're all entitled to our own opinions regards to these fan fictions, creepypastas, or whatever. This is simply my own personal thoughts. My final rating of this story would have to be I guess I'm gonna give this one a 10 out of 10. It was really well made, really well detailed, it was a great story, and it was actually really amazing, really well done, and I definitely have to say that I like a lot of what this story had to, be honest. I really could visualize this being, an actual episode of The Loud House, so that's definitely something I'm definitely gonna say. So, with that being the case, what did you guys think about this story? Did you all enjoy it? Did you not? Also, what we have done person to help make this story a lot better? Leave me know what your thoughts are down in the comment section down below. I'm the Queen of Lions. Thank you so much for watching today's episode. And if you happen to be brand new here on this channel, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe, because I make brand new videos every single day. Don't forget to ring the notification bell to when I upload. And as always, I'll be seeing you all in the next video. And roll the outro, because I'm out.